The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and expensive cologne. Marcus Chen stood at the head of the glass table, his reflection sharp against the Austin skyline behind him, watching his career implode in real time on the projection screen. The numbers didn't lie. $3 million in projected losses, 6 weeks of runway left. And somewhere in this building, a 26-year-old data analyst named Rachel Morrison had the email thread that proved she'd warned him this would happen. His phone buzzed for the 14th time that morning. The CEO. Again. But we need to go back. Back to the moment when everything could have been different. Back to a Tuesday morning in March, when the air conditioning was broken and tempers were already thin. Marcus had been VP of Product Development at Axiom Technologies for 18 months. Not long enough to feel secure, but long enough to believe he'd figured the game out. The company was a rising star in the fintech space. Payment processing solutions for mid-sized retailers, the kind of unglamorous work that printed money if you got it right. They just closed a Series B round, $40 million that came with expectations, and board members who actually read quarterly reports. He'd built his reputation on decisive action, on knowing when to kill bad ideas before they wasted resources, on being the adult in the room when the engineers wanted to chase shiny objects instead of shipping product. At 38, he was young for his role, and he knew people were watching, waiting for him to stumble. The product roadmap meeting happened every 2 weeks, third-floor conference room, 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus hated these meetings. 12 people around a table, each protecting their own territory, each convinced their feature was the one that would change everything. That particular Tuesday, he'd already sat through 45 minutes of debate about button colors and user flow animations. His coffee had gone cold. His patience had gone colder. "Next item," he said, cutting off Dave from UX mid-sentence. "We need to finalize the rollout schedule for the new API integration. Kevin, you're up." Kevin Patel, the lead back-end engineer, pulled up his slides. "We're on track for the June 1st launch. The partner retailers are already onboarded, contracts signed. We're looking at processing volume to triple in the first quarter, which means—" "Excuse me." The voice came from the far end of the table, where the junior staff usually sat in careful silence. Rachel Morrison, one of the data analysts, had her hand half raised like she was back in college. She'd been with the company for 9 months, worked in the analytics pod, generated reports that Marcus occasionally skimmed. "Yes?" Marcus kept his tone neutral, but he was already annoyed. These meetings ran long enough without sidebar conversations. Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "I've been running projections on the API integration, and I think we need to build in a real-time anomaly detection layer before we go live. The current system monitors transactions in batch cycles, but with the volume we're expecting—" "We're aware of the monitoring systems, Rachel," Marcus interrupted. "We've got robust fraud detection, error logging, the works. This has been through architecture review." "I understand. But I'm talking about something different." She pulled up her laptop, fingers moving quickly. "I ran simulations based on the partner data we received. If we get a cascade failure, like if one of the major retailers has a corrupted data feed or a pricing error, the batch processing means we might not catch it for 6 to 8 hours. With the transaction volumes we're projecting, that's a potential exposure of—" "How much development time are we talking about?" Marcus cut in. Rachel hesitated. "Engineering estimated 4 to 6 weeks for a proper implementation, but—" "4 to 6 weeks." Marcus set his coffee down harder than he meant to. "Rachel, we have a contractual obligation to launch June 1st. We have retailers who've built their summer promotions around this integration. You're asking us to delay a multi-million-dollar product launch because of a theoretical edge case." "It's not theoretical," Rachel said quietly. "I have the data." You have projections based on assumptions. Marcus could feel the room's attention shifting, sensing conflict. This was the moment to be decisive, to show leadership. Look, I appreciate the diligence, I really do, but part of being in product development is understanding prioritization and risk management. We can't chase every possible scenario. That's how you end up with feature creep and blown deadlines. He turned back to Kevin. The monitoring we have in place is industry standard. Multiple companies process this volume without additional layers. We're good to proceed. But Rachel wasn't done. Marcus, I really think if you look at the models, I've seen enough models to know that data analysts can prove anything if they torture the numbers long enough. He'd meant it as a joke, sort of, a way to lighten the tension, but it came out wrong. And he saw Rachel's expression change. What I mean is, we need to focus on shipping, not on building defensive systems for problems that probably won't happen. Sarah Kim from engineering spoke up. Actually, Marcus, what Rachel's describing isn't that unusual. I worked at PayPal before this, and we had a cascade event that cost us about $2 million because PayPal processes a completely different volume and has different use cases, Marcus said. Look, I'm not saying real-time monitoring isn't valuable, but it's not critical path for launch. We can add it to the Q3 roadmap, revisit after we have real production data. For now, we're already at capacity. June 1st deadline stands. He could see Rachel's jaw tighten. She glanced down at her laptop, then back up at him. With respect, I think this is a mistake. Noted, Marcus said flatly, moving on. The meeting continued, but the energy had shifted. Marcus had won, but it felt hollow somehow. As people filed out, he saw Rachel gathering her materials with stiff, controlled movements. Sarah lingered near her, speaking in low tones. Marcus told himself he'd done the right thing. You couldn't let junior staff derail major initiatives based on speculative analysis. That was how projects died. That was how VPs lost their jobs. 2 hours later, an email landed in his inbox. From Rachel, subject line, API Integration Risk Analysis, for the record. Attached was a 40-page document filled with data models, failure scenarios, financial projections. He skimmed the executive summary. Catastrophic failure probability, 12 to 18%, potential financial exposure per failure event, $2 to $5 million, recommended mitigation, real-time anomaly detection with automated rollback capability. Marcus closed the email without reading further. He had actual work to do. The rest of that week passed in the usual chaos of pre-launch development, bug fixes, vendor calls, architecture reviews. Marcus saw Rachel in the hallways occasionally, always with her laptop bag, always walking quickly to wherever data analysts went. They didn't speak. On Friday, he stayed late finishing a board presentation. The office had mostly emptied out, just the skeletal night crew of engineers and the cleaning staff. As he walked past the analytics pit, he noticed a light still on at Rachel's desk. She was hunched over her monitor, headphones in, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and printed spreadsheets covered in highlighter marks. She looked exhausted. Marcus felt a brief flash of something. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. He'd been that person once, the junior employee working late to prove themselves, to get someone's attention. But then he remembered the meeting, the way she'd challenged him in front of the team, and the feeling passed. He went home to his apartment in downtown Austin, a sleek 2-bedroom in a new development, the kind of place that screamed tech success with its floor-to-ceiling windows and smart home integration. He ordered Thai food from his favorite place, the one that knew his usual order, and settled onto his Italian leather couch to watch the Spurs game. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-girlfriend, Jennifer. "Saw your LinkedIn. Congrats on the launch." They'd broken up 6 months ago, her frustration with his work hours finally outweighing whatever they'd had. He stared at the message for a moment, then set the phone face down without responding. The apartment felt too big, too quiet. Success was supposed to feel different than this, wasn't it? He was VP at a hot startup, pulling in a salary that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago when he was grinding as a senior product manager at IBM. He had the title, the stock options, the corner office view. But sitting alone in his expensive apartment, half watching basketball he didn't really care about, Marcus felt the familiar hollow sensation that came late at night when there was no one to share achievements with, no one to tell about the small victories and frustrations that made up a life. He fell asleep on the couch thinking about Q3 revenue targets and whether he should buy the Tesla he'd been eyeing, whether Jennifer would be impressed if she saw him driving it, then feeling pathetic for caring. He did not think about Rachel Morrison's 40-page report. He did not think about cascade failures or anomaly detection or real-time monitoring systems. He definitely did not think about the possibility that he might be wrong, because men like Marcus Chen, men who'd clawed their way up from middle-class backgrounds, who'd worked 80-hour weeks to prove they belonged in rooms full of Ivy League graduates, who'd learned to project confidence even when they felt none. Those men couldn't afford to second-guess themselves. Doubt was weakness. Hesitation was failure. Or so he told himself as the game played on unwatched and the city lights glittered outside his window, indifferent to his certainty or his fears. June first arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that made Austin feel like a convection oven. Marcus wore his lucky shirt, a crisp white button-down from Nordstrom, and got to the office at 6:30 a.m. The API integration was going live at 8, timed to catch the East Coast morning shopping rush. The war room was already buzzing. Kevin and his engineering team had set up monitoring dashboards across 3 large screens, tracking transaction flows, error rates, system health. The CTO was there, along with the CEO, David Brennan, a former Oracle exec who'd taken Axiom from 4 employees to 200 in 3 years. "How are we feeling?" David asked, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. He smelled like expensive aftershave and coffee. "Confident," Marcus said, and mostly meant it. "All systems green. Partners are ready. This is going to be a good day." At 7:58 a.m., Kevin started the countdown. The room went quiet. Marcus felt his heart rate pick up despite himself. This was why he'd gotten into product development. These moments when months of work either succeeded or failed. When all the meetings and compromises and late nights either paid off or didn't. Deploying in 3, 2, 1. The dashboards lit up. Transaction data started flowing. The first processed payment came through at 8:14 a.m., then another, then 50 more. The numbers climbed steadily. 200 transactions per minute, 500, 800. David grinned. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. By 9 a.m., they'd processed 15,000 transactions across 12 partner retailers. Everything was running smoothly. Error rate was nominal, 0.03%, well within acceptable parameters. Marcus fielded congratulatory texts from board members and investors. At 9:40, he saw Rachel walk past the war room. She glanced at the dashboards, her expression unreadable, then continued down the hall without stopping. Marcus felt a twinge of something. Vindication. He'd made the right call. The launch was perfect. All that worry about cascade failures and real-time monitoring had been exactly what he'd said. Overcautious speculation from someone without enough experience to know what really mattered. By noon, they'd processed 40,000 transactions and generated an estimated $60,000 in fees. The engineering team ordered pizza. Someone opened beers even though it wasn't 5 o'clock yet. David gave an impromptu speech about vision and execution and the Axiom family. Marcus allowed himself to relax. The worst was over. Now it was just a matter of monitoring for the first few days, making minor adjustments and watching the revenue roll in. At 1:47 p.m., the first warning appeared on the monitoring dashboard. It was small, A slight uptick in failed transactions from one of the partner retailers, a regional department store chain called Meridian Mart, 43 locations across Texas and Oklahoma. Nothing catastrophic, just error rates climbing from 0.03% to 0.2%. Kevin noticed it first. Seeing some failures from Meridian, probably just a temporary network thing. Keep an eye on it, Marcus said, but that's well within normal variation. By 2:15 p.m., Meridian's error rate had climbed to 1.3%. Other retailers were still running clean, but Meridian was clearly having issues. Want me to call them? Kevin asked. Give it another 15 minutes, Marcus said. Probably something on their end that'll resolve itself. It did not resolve itself. By 2:30 p.m., Meridian's error rate was at 4.7%, and the nature of the errors had changed. Instead of simple network timeouts, the logs were showing data validation failures, prices that didn't match product SKUs, quantities that exceeded inventory, transactions for items that didn't exist in their catalog. Okay, this is weird, Kevin muttered, pulling up the raw logs. It's like their product database got scrambled or something. Marcus felt the first cold finger of real concern. His shirt collar suddenly felt too tight. He loosened his tie slightly, trying to maintain the appearance of control, while his mind raced through implications. Around the war room, he could feel the atmosphere shifting. Engineers were exchanging glances. Someone from QA had gone pale. The celebratory energy from this morning had curdled into something that tasted like fear. Can we pause just their traffic? Keep the other partners running, but isolate Meridian until we figure out what's happening. We can, but... Kevin's face had gone pale. Marcus, look at the transaction volume. The dashboard showed Meridian's processed transaction count, 47,000. In just over 5 hours, that single retailer had accounted for more than half of all traffic through the system. That can't be right, Marcus said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. There are only 43 stores. How are they? They're promotional pricing, Sarah said quietly. She'd been watching from the corner, arms crossed. There was something in her expression that looked like pity, and Marcus hated it. Remember, they're running a massive summer kickoff sale this weekend. 50 to 70% off almost everything. They expected huge volume, which is why they were so excited about the API integration, better processing speed for checkout. The implications hit Marcus like cold water. Meridian wasn't just any partner. They were the anchor, the showcase, the retailer they'd used in all the board presentations to demonstrate Axiom's ability to handle peak loads. They were the proof of concept that was supposed to unlock the next tier of enterprise clients. And they were melting down in real time. Get them on the phone, Marcus ordered, his voice coming out harder than he intended. Now. It took 20 minutes to reach Meridian's IT director, a harried-sounding woman named Patricia who was apparently dealing with her own crisis. Marcus could hear shouting in the background, phones ringing, the chaos of a command center under siege. We're getting customer complaints about charged prices not matching advertised prices, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. And our inventory system is showing sales for products we discontinued 6 months ago. We've got people saying they bought leather jackets in June for $12. $12, Marcus. Our cheapest jacket retails for $89. What the hell is happening on your end? Marcus's stomach dropped. We're investigating, he said, trying to project calm he didn't feel. But we need to understand what changed in your product database today. Nothing changed. We loaded the promotional pricing last week, tested it 3 times. This morning it was all fine. Everything was fine until your system went live. Except it wasn't fine. As Kevin and the engineering team dug deeper, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Meridian's promotional pricing data had been exported from their legacy system with a format that their API integration hadn't properly validated. Instead of cleanly failing, the system had started making assumptions, matching products by approximate names, using default prices when explicit prices were missing, creating ghost inventory records. And because Axiom's monitoring system ran in batch cycles, checking data integrity every 6 hours, none of this had been flagged in real time. For 5.5 hours, thousands of customers had been charged incorrect prices. Some were overcharged. Most were undercharged. Meridian's inventory records were a disaster. Their customer service lines were melting down. Social media was already lighting up with complaints and confusion. Marcus pulled up Twitter on his phone and immediately regretted it. Meridian fail was trending. Screenshots of receipts showing absurd prices, angry customers demanding refunds. One viral tweet showed a receipt for a $400 leather sectional sold for $89. And every single one of those transactions had been processed through Axiom's system, which meant Axiom was liable for the financial reconciliation. At 3:45 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. Not a text, an actual call from David Brennan. "My office, now!" The walk to the executive floor felt like a death march. Marcus passed colleagues who quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in their monitors. The news had spread. Of course it had. In a 200-person company, bad news traveled at the speed of Slack. David's office occupied a corner with panoramic views of downtown Austin. Usually, Marcus loved this office, loved being invited into it. Today, it felt like a courtroom. David was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, his back to the door. He didn't turn when Marcus entered. "Close the door." Marcus did. "Tell me something, Marcus." David's voice was quiet, which was somehow worse than if he'd been yelling. "When we hired you, what did I say was the most important quality in a VP?" "Judgment," Marcus said. "Judgment." David finally turned. His expression was unreadable. Not intelligence, not experience, not charisma or decisiveness or any of that leadership bullshit. Judgment, the ability to make good calls when you don't have perfect information. He walked to his desk and picked up a printed document. Marcus recognized it immediately. 40 pages. Rachel Morrison's name in the header. "So help me understand," David continued, "how someone with supposedly good judgment receives a detailed, well-researched risk analysis that predicts, with remarkable accuracy as it turns out, exactly the catastrophic failure we're currently experiencing, and decides to completely ignore it." Marcus felt his throat constrict. "I made a judgment call that was wrong." David set the report down carefully. "Catastrophically, expensively, publicly wrong. Do you know what our lawyers are telling me right now? We're looking at potential liability of $3 million, maybe more, depending on how Meridian's legal team decides to play this. 3 million, the number hung in the air between them. "How many messages have you sent on June 1st? David asked. The question threw Marcus. "What?" "To Rachel Morrison, the person who tried to prevent this disaster. How many times have you reached out to her today?" Marcus said nothing. "That's what I thought." David sat down heavily in his chair. "You know what the worst part is? It's not the money. Money we can recover. It's not even the reputation hit, though that's going to sting. It's that we had someone in this building, someone junior, someone without fancy credentials or impressive titles, who saw this coming and tried to warn us, and we didn't just ignore her, we humiliated her." At 4:30 p.m., Marcus called an emergency meeting. The war room had transformed from a celebration space to something that felt like a funeral. David Brennan sat at the head of the table, his expression carved from stone. "Talk to me," David said. "How bad is it?" Kevin pulled up the damage assessment. We've identified 63,000 problematic transactions. Average discrepancy is about $47 per transaction. Meridian is demanding we cover the difference between what customers were charged and what they should have been charged, plus costs for database restoration and customer service over time. What's the total? David's voice was very quiet. Rough estimate, $2.8 million. The room went silent. Marcus felt like he was falling, like the floor had opened up beneath his chair. How did this happen? David asked. Marcus opened his mouth, but Kevin spoke first. There was a proposal for real-time anomaly detection back in March. It would have caught this in the first few minutes instead of hours. David turned to Marcus. And I made a judgment call that it wasn't critical path for launch, Marcus said. The system we implemented was industry standard. This particular failure scenario was in the risk analysis document I received this morning, David said, sliding a printed report across the table. Marcus recognized it immediately. 40 pages. Rachel Morrison's name in the header. She sent this to you? No, David said. She sent it to her manager last week, flagged as urgent. He forwarded it to me this morning after the Meridian issue started. I've been reading it for the last hour. It's extraordinary work, actually. Detailed, well-researched, and apparently completely ignored. Marcus felt his throat constrict. I read her summary. The risk probability seemed low, and we had timeline pressures. The risk probability was 12 to 18%. David said. That's not low, Marcus. That's Russian roulette with 2 chambers loaded. He leaned back in his chair. Tell me something. When she presented this in the roadmap meeting, what exactly did you say? The memory came back with crystal clarity. The burnt coffee smell. Rachel's voice, careful and professional. His own dismissiveness. I said we needed to focus on shipping rather than building defensive systems for problems that probably wouldn't happen. You said her concerns were an edge case. Yes. You said data analysts can prove anything if they torture the numbers. Marcus's face burned. I was trying to be funny. It came out wrong. David stood up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to fix this. I don't care how many engineers it takes or how much it costs. You're going to implement the real-time monitoring system Rachel recommended, and you're going to do it in 2 weeks, not 6. You're going to personally oversee the remediation with Meridian, and you're going to figure out how to make sure this never happens again. And if I can't? David looked at him for a long moment. Then we'll have a different conversation about your future here. After the meeting ended, Marcus sat alone in the conference room, staring at Rachel's report. He flipped through the pages, seeing now what he'd refused to see before, the careful analysis, the detailed scenarios, the exact failure mode that had just cost them millions. On page 37, there was a handwritten note in the margin, "Please reconsider. This is preventable." Marcus closed the document and pressed his palms against his eyes. Outside the windows, the Austin sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The office had gone quiet. Most people had left, either to celebrate the launch or to escape the disaster, depending on when they'd heard the news. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his email. He typed, "Rachel," then stopped. What could he possibly say? He deleted the draft and sat in the growing darkness, listening to the building's ventilation system hum its endless mechanical song. The next 2 weeks felt like walking through broken glass barefoot. Marcus arrived at the office before dawn and left after midnight, sleeping in snatches on the couch in his office, subsisting on vending machine coffee, and whatever takeout stayed open late enough. The Meridian situation was a hydra. Every solution spawned 3 new problems. The financial reconciliation required matching 63,000 transactions against customer complaints, some legitimate, many opportunistic. People who'd bought a discounted shirt suddenly claimed they'd purchased an entire wardrobe. Meridian's lawyers were involved. Axiom's lawyers were involved. The insurance company was asking pointed questions about risk management protocols. But worse than the financial bleeding was the reputational damage. Word had spread in the fintech community. 2 other partner retailers quietly delayed their integrations, citing internal scheduling conflicts. A trade publication ran an article titled, "When Speed Trumps Safety: Lessons from Axiom's Launch Disaster." Marcus's inbox was a wasteland of recriminations and damage control. Board members wanted explanations. Investors wanted reassurance. The engineering team wanted clear direction that kept changing as new problems emerged. And through it all, Rachel Morrison was everywhere and nowhere. She'd been assigned to the remediation team. Her data analysis skills were needed to verify the transaction reconciliation. She worked from a small conference room on the 4th floor, door usually closed, headphones on, generating reports that Kevin's team used to track down discrepancies. Marcus saw her in passing, in the hallway, at the coffee station, once in the parking garage at 7 in the morning, both of them arriving too early because sleep had become impossible. Their eyes met briefly, and she nodded, a crisp, professional acknowledgement that somehow felt worse than anger would have. She never came to him directly. All her communications went through Kevin or her manager, clinical status updates stripped of anything personal. "She's being professional," Sarah told him one evening when they were both debugging a particularly nasty data consistency issue. "More professional than she has to be, honestly." "I know," Marcus said. "Do you?" Sarah fixed him with a look. "Because from where I'm sitting, she got humiliated in front of the entire product team, had her work dismissed as overcautious speculation, and then got proven catastrophically right. And now she's working 80-hour weeks, fixing a problem you created while you haven't even acknowledged what happened." "I tried to email her." "Marcus, trying isn't doing." Sarah stood up, gathering her laptop. "I like you. I think you're usually a good leader, but you fucked up and you're acting like a coward about it." After she left, Marcus sat staring at his screen, Sarah's words echoing in his mind. She was right. He'd been avoiding the confrontation because it was uncomfortable, because he didn't know what to say, because some part of him was still defensive. He pulled up his email and found Rachel's contact, typed, "Can we talk? I owe you an apology." His finger hovered over the send button, then his phone rang. "David Brennan. Conference room A now. We've got another problem." The problem was called Velocity Banking, a partner retailer scheduled to launch their integration in 3 days. Their CEO had called David personally, expressing concerns about system reliability and asking if perhaps they should postpone. "If we lose velocity, we lose credibility," David said to the assembled team. "They're our second biggest partner by volume. If they pull out, others will follow. We'll be a cautionary tale instead of a growth company." Marcus knew what was coming before David said it. "I need you to go to Chicago, meet with their executive team, convince them we've fixed the issues, show them the new monitoring system." "The system isn't finished," Marcus said. "We've got the core anomaly detection built, but the automated rollback, then finish it in 3 days, David said. "Or explain to our board why our revenue projections are off by 40% this quarter." Late that night, Marcus was still in the office, reviewing the monitoring system architecture with Kevin and 2 other senior engineers. They'd been at it for 6 hours, surviving on cold pizza and desperation. "The core detection algorithms are solid," Kevin said, pointing at a diagram on the whiteboard. "We can identify anomalous patterns in real time, but the automated rollback is complicated. We need to be able to freeze transactions, reverse processing, notify partners, all without creating data inconsistencies." "How long to build it properly?" Marcus asked. Kevin exchanged glances with the other engineers. 3 weeks, maybe 4. "We have 3 days." Then we're going to cut corners, and corners are how we got here in the first place. Marcus felt something crack inside him. The exhaustion, the stress, the weight of having made a catastrophic mistake, it all converged into a moment of desperate clarity. "What if we brought in Rachel?" he said quietly. The room went silent. "She designed this system," Marcus continued. "She's been thinking about it for 3 months while we've been playing catch-up for 2 weeks. She knows the edge cases. She knows what could go wrong." "You think she'll help you?" Kevin asked carefully. "I don't know, but I have to ask." He found her still working on the 4th floor at 11:30 p.m. The conference room was lit by the glow of her laptop and a desk lamp she'd brought from home. Spreadsheets covered every surface. She had a cold cup of coffee at her elbow, and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Marcus knocked on the doorframe. She looked up, her expression neutral. "Can I come in?" Rachel gestured to a chair. "If you're here for the reconciliation status, I sent the updated report to Kevin an hour ago." "I'm not here for a report." Marcus sat down, acutely aware of the space between them, the careful distance she was maintaining. "I'm here to apologize." She watched him, waiting. "What I said in that meeting was wrong," Marcus continued. "Not just tactically wrong, but personally wrong. You did good work, important work, and I dismissed it because I was more concerned with meeting a deadline than with being right. I humiliated you in front of the team. I ignored your expertise, and then I compounded it by avoiding you instead of taking responsibility." Rachel's expression didn't change. "Okay. That's it? Okay? What do you want me to say, Marcus?" Her voice was calm, almost clinical. "You're apologizing because we're in crisis mode, and you need something from me, not because you actually think you were wrong." "That's not—" But he stopped, because wasn't it? At least partly. "Yes," he admitted. "I need your help. We have 3 days to finish the monitoring system before the velocity meeting, and we're not going to make it without you. But that doesn't mean the apology isn't real. The apology isn't the problem," Rachel said. "The problem is that you built an entire product development culture where junior staff know their ideas will be dismissed unless they come from the right person, at the right level, with the right pedigree. I'm one person. But how many other ideas has this company killed because someone didn't have your trust, or Kevin's trust, or the CTO's trust?" The question hit harder than Marcus expected. "I don't know. Neither do I. But I think about it a lot." Rachel closed her laptop. "You want my help on the monitoring system?" "Yes." "Then here are my terms. I want credit. Formal credit, in writing. For the system architecture. I want a seat in the product roadmap meetings going forward. And I want a commitment that this company will build better processes for evaluating ideas, regardless of who suggests them." "Done," Marcus said immediately. "And I want you to present the system to the velocity team, not me hiding in the background while you take credit. I want to stand up there and explain how it works and why it matters, because I'm tired of being invisible." Marcus met her eyes. "Absolutely. You should present it. It's your system." Something in Rachel's expression softened, just slightly. "Okay then. Let's see the current build." The next 72 hours were a blur of code, coffee, and arguments about database architecture. Rachel worked with an intensity that left the rest of the team scrambling to keep up. She'd been thinking about this system for months, had already designed half of it in theoretical models, and now she was translating theory into reality at a pace that left Marcus frankly awed. The small 4th-floor conference room became their war room. Whiteboards covered every wall, filled with Rachel's architectural diagrams, data flowcharts, edge case scenarios. Empty coffee cups accumulated on every surface. Someone had brought in a small fan because the air conditioning couldn't keep up with the heat generated by 6 laptops running at full capacity. Marcus watched Rachel work and saw things he'd missed before. The way she thought in systems, seeing connections that took others hours to recognize. The way she anticipated objections before they were raised, already having solutions prepared. The way she could switch seamlessly between explaining complex technical concepts to engineers and translating those same concepts into business terms that executives would understand. She was also brutally honest in a way that Marcus realized he'd been insulated from. When his suggestions were good, she said so. When they were stupid, she said that too, without softening it. That approach will create race conditions, she'd say, pointing at a whiteboard diagram. We need transactional consistency or the whole thing falls apart. The first time she flatly told him an idea wouldn't work, Marcus felt a flash of defensive anger. He was still the VP. He had 15 years of product experience, but he caught himself, took a breath and asked, "Why not?" Rachel had looked surprised at the question, as if she'd expected an argument. Then she'd walked him through the technical reasoning, step by step, until he understood not just that he was wrong, but why. "Okay," Marcus had said. "You're right. What's the better approach?" Something had shifted in Rachel's expression then, a subtle relaxation, a recognition that maybe this could actually work. Kevin and the other engineers adapted quickly, treating Rachel as the technical lead she was clearly capable of being. The dynamic shifted. It was no longer Marcus's team fixing his mistake. It was Rachel's team building her vision, with Marcus in a supporting role. And surprisingly, Marcus found he didn't mind. There was a relief in letting go of the need to be the smartest person in the room, in admitting when someone else knew better. On the second night, around 11 p.m., the team hit a wall. The core detection algorithms were solid, but the automated rollback mechanism kept creating data inconsistencies in their test environment. "We're missing something," Kevin said, frustration evident in his voice. "The rollback works fine for simple transactions, but when we have dependencies, when one transaction references another, it's leaving orphaned records." They'd been staring at the problem for 3 hours. Marcus could see exhaustion in everyone's faces. Rachel had been running on caffeine and determination for 48 hours straight, and it was starting to show. "Maybe we need to step back," Marcus suggested. "Look at the problem fresh in the morning." "We don't have time to step back," Rachel said sharply. Then she closed her eyes, took a breath. "Sorry. I'm tired." "We're all tired," Marcus said. "But tired people make mistakes, and we can't afford mistakes on this." Rachel laughed, a short, bitter sound. "That's rich, coming from you." The room went silent. Kevin suddenly found his laptop screen fascinating. Sarah looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Marcus could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge. He could get defensive, pull rank, shut down the conversation, or he could do the harder thing. "You're right," he said quietly. "I made a massive mistake, and I'm still making mistakes, and I'll probably make more. But I'm trying to make different mistakes than before, better mistakes. And part of that is knowing when to call it for the night." Rachel met his eyes for a long moment. Then she nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Okay. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., fresh eyes." As the team filed out, Rachel lingered, shutting down her laptop with careful, deliberate movements. "Marcus? Yeah? Thank you for not making this weird. For actually listening." Marcus leaned against the conference table. "Can I ask you something? Why are you helping me? After everything, you could have let me fail. Probably would have been justified." Rachel was quiet for a moment, organizing her papers into neat stacks. "I thought about it," she admitted. "There was a part of me that wanted to watch you crash and burn. But then I realized, if you fail, we all fail. Meridian isn't your problem, it's Axiom's problem. And if this company goes down, it's not just you who loses your job. It's everyone, including people who had nothing to do with this disaster." She zipped up her laptop bag. Plus, I meant what I said in my terms. I want credit for this work. And you can't get credit for solving a problem if the company doesn't survive long enough to notice. Mercenary. I respect that. I prefer strategically minded, Rachel said with a slight smile. But yeah. They walked to the elevator together. Outside the windows, Austin was dark except for the highway lights and the glow from other downtown buildings where other people were working too late, chasing their own deadlines. For what it's worth, Marcus said, I am sorry. Not just for the disaster, but for how I treated you. You deserved better. Rachel pressed the elevator button. Yeah, I did, but I also needed to learn to fight for my ideas harder. To not just send a report and hope someone reads it, to demand to be heard instead of waiting for permission. You shouldn't have to fight that hard to be taken seriously. Maybe not, but that's the world we live in. The elevator doors opened. The question is whether we can build a better one. They rode down in silence, each lost in thought, and Marcus found himself hoping that maybe, just maybe, they actually could. On the morning of the Velocity meeting, Marcus put on his best suit and met Rachel in the lobby. She wore a professional navy dress and carried a leather portfolio that looked new. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted, but also ready. The flight to Chicago was bumpy, the kind of turbulence that made the flight attendants sit down mid-service. Rachel gripped her armrest and reviewed her presentation notes. Marcus watched her out of the corner of his eye. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Why did you stay? After everything that happened, you could have left, gone to another company, one that would appreciate your work. Rachel was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the clouds. I thought about it, she said finally. I had a recruiter reach out from a competitor. Better title, more money. But then I realized that running away doesn't fix the problem. The problem exists everywhere. People like me getting dismissed, people like you making assumptions. So either I leave and let it happen to the next person, or I stay and fight to make it better. That's principled. It's exhausting, Rachel said with a small smile. But yeah, I guess it is. The Velocity Banking headquarters occupied 4 floors of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. Their executive team assembled in a corner conference room with views of Lake Michigan, CEO, CFO, CTO, and their head of operations, all of them skeptical and showing it. Marcus did the opening remarks, providing context and taking full responsibility for the Meridian disaster. Then he stepped aside. I'd like to introduce Rachel Morrison, the architect of our new real-time anomaly detection system, he said. She's going to walk you through how we've fundamentally changed our approach to risk management. Rachel stepped forward, and Marcus saw her take a breath, centering herself. Then she began. She was brilliant. She explained the technical architecture in language the executives could understand. She walked through specific failure scenarios and how the system would respond. She didn't minimize the Meridian disaster. Instead, she used it as a teaching example, showing exactly how her system would have caught the problem in the first 3 minutes. The Velocity CTO asked pointed questions about edge cases and system overhead. Rachel answered them all, sometimes pulling up code on her laptop to demonstrate specific implementations. 45 minutes in, the Velocity CEO leaned back in his chair. This is impressive work, he said. How long have you been with Axiom? 11 months, Rachel said. And you designed this entire system? Rachel glanced at Marcus, then back to the CEO. I proposed the initial architecture in March. It was shelved due to timeline constraints. After the Meridian incident, I was brought in to lead the implementation. The CEO's expression shifted, understanding clicking into place. I see. Well, if Axiom is smart, they'll make sure they don't make that mistake again. We won't, Marcus said firmly. Rachel has a permanent seat at our product strategy table. Her voice matters. After the meeting, walking back to their hotel through Chicago's evening rush, Rachel turned to Marcus. You didn't have to say that last part. Yes, I did, Marcus said, and I meant it. When we get back, we're restructuring how we evaluate proposals, anonymous submission process for major features, cross-functional review teams, better documentation standards. I don't ever want us to lose good ideas because of organizational politics. Rachel smiled, a real smile this time, not the careful professional mask she'd been wearing. That would be good. That night, Marcus lay awake in his hotel room, thinking about the path that had led him here, the arrogance of certainty, the cost of not listening, the difference between being decisive and being foolish. His phone buzzed, a text from David. Velocity is staying. Nice work. Marcus typed back, Rachel's work, she saved it. Another buzz, then make sure she knows that, and make sure the board knows it too. Marcus smiled in the darkness, and finally, for the first time in 2 weeks, fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. 3 months later, Axiom Technologies held its quarterly all-hands meeting in the main cafeteria, a space that smelled like coffee, and the catered breakfast pastries that had become a company tradition. Marcus stood near the back, watching David Brennan work the room with his characteristic energy, shaking hands and asking about people's weekends. The company had changed in small but significant ways. The monitoring system was live across all partner integrations, processing millions of transactions daily with 0 catastrophic failures. Meridian had not only stayed, but had expanded their contract, impressed by how quickly Axiom had turned disaster into reliability. 2 new enterprise clients had signed on specifically because of the anomaly detection capabilities, but the changes Marcus was most proud of weren't on the financial statements. The product proposal process had been completely overhauled. Ideas were now submitted anonymously through a structured template that emphasized data, risk analysis, and clear success metrics. A rotating review committee, including engineers, analysts, designers, and product managers, evaluated submissions on merit rather than origin. Rachel had designed the system naturally, and it was working. In the last quarter, 12 proposals had been approved for development. 4 had come from junior staff who'd never before had their ideas seriously considered. 1 was from an intern who'd identified a significant security vulnerability and proposed an elegant solution. "All right, everyone, let's get started," David called out, and the room settled into expectant attention. Great quarter. Truly great quarter. Revenue up 28%, customer retention at an all-time high, and we just closed our Series C at a valuation I literally cannot disclose yet, but trust me, it's good. Applause and cheers. Marcus clapped along, feeling the energy in the room. "But the news I'm most excited to share," David continued, "is about our company culture. 3 months ago, we had a failure. A big, expensive, public failure, and we could have responded by circling the wagons, blaming individuals, and building a culture of fear. Instead, we chose to learn." He gestured to a slide that appeared on the screen behind him. "I want to talk about the Axiom Innovation Initiative. Starting next month, we're formalizing a program where any employee can pitch ideas directly to senior leadership. We're creating a dedicated innovation budget. We're building cross-functional collaboration spaces. And we're being led in this effort by someone who exemplifies the kind of thinking we want to encourage." Another slide appeared, Rachel's photo along with a new title, Director of Product Innovation. The room erupted in applause. Marcus saw Rachel in the front row, looking simultaneously proud and slightly overwhelmed, accepting congratulations from the people around her. After the meeting, Marcus found her outside on the patio, taking a moment away from the attention. "Congratulations," he said. "Well deserved." "Thanks." Rachel leaned against the railing, looking out at the Austin skyline. "It's surreal, honestly. 4 months ago, I was convinced I was going to quit." "I'm glad you didn't." "Yeah, well." She turned to face him. "I've been meaning to say something about the apology and the changes you've pushed for. It mattered. It still matters. A lot of people in your position would have doubled down, protected their ego, found ways to blame others. You didn't do that." Marcus shook his head. "I did do that initially. I avoided you for 2 weeks because I was embarrassed and defensive. But then you stopped," Rachel said. "That's the part that matters. Admitting you were wrong. Actually changing behavior instead of just offering empty words. Do you know how rare that is?" They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching cars navigate the streets below. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "That day in the meeting when I called your concerns an edge case, did you know you were right? I mean, really know?" "No," Rachel admitted. "I was maybe 70% confident. The data supported the risk, but I couldn't be certain. That's what made it so hard. I was asking you to potentially delay a major launch based on something that might not happen. When you dismissed it, part of me wondered if maybe I was being overcautious. But you sent the report anyway. I sent it for the record, so if something did go wrong, there would be documentation that someone had raised concerns. I didn't think it would actually change anything." She smiled slightly. "Honestly, I was mostly angry that I'd wasted 3 weeks on analysis that nobody would read." "I read it," Marcus said quietly. "Eventually. And it was the best product analysis I've seen in my career." Rachel's expression softened. "Thank you. That means a lot." Over the following months, Marcus settled into a new rhythm. He was still VP of Product Development, but his role had evolved. He spent less time in decision-making meetings and more time in collaborative sessions, helping teams refine ideas rather than judging them. He became better at identifying his own biases, at recognizing when his need for decisiveness was overriding good judgment. He also became better at admitting uncertainty. In product reviews, he'd say things like, "I don't know if this will work, let's test it," instead of declaring outcomes with false confidence. It made him feel vulnerable at first, but he noticed the team responded well, offering their own ideas more freely. The changes weren't always comfortable. There were days when Marcus caught himself slipping into old patterns, dismissing an idea too quickly. Talking over someone in a meeting, letting his ego drive decisions. But now he had people around him who would call him out. Sarah, especially, had developed a talent for the raised eyebrow that said, "Really? We're doing this again?" His relationship with Rachel evolved into something like friendship, or at least mutual respect, with occasional coffee meetings. She pushed him intellectually in ways that were uncomfortable and necessary. He tried to return the favor, sharing his experience navigating organizational politics and executive expectations. They fell into a routine of Tuesday morning coffee in the cafeteria before the chaos of the day began. Not scheduled meetings, just a standing understanding that if both were in the office, they'd connect. One Tuesday in late August, Rachel showed up looking frustrated. "Bad morning?" Marcus asked, sliding a latte across to her. He'd learned she took it with an extra shot and oat milk. "I had a proposal rejected by the review committee yesterday," she said. "A system for predictive load balancing during peak shopping events. Spent 3 weeks on the analysis." "Why'd they reject it?" "Engineering complexity versus projected ROI. Which is fair, actually. The numbers were borderline." She took a sip of her coffee. "But it still stings." Marcus nodded. "First time having something turned down?" "Since the new process, yeah." "How are you handling it?" Rachel considered the question. Better than I would have 6 months ago. Then I would have taken it personally. Assumed they didn't value my work. Now I can see it's just sometimes ideas aren't good enough, or the timing's wrong, or the priorities don't align. That's mature of you, Marcus said. Took me years to learn that lesson. I spent my 20s convinced every rejected proposal was a personal attack. Really? You seem so confident. Confidence is a performance, Marcus said. The real growth is learning when to let it go. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching early arrivals filter through the cafeteria, grabbing breakfast before the day's grind began. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said. "Do you ever think about that meeting, the one where all this started?" "Every day," Marcus admitted. "Sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m. and replay it in my head, thinking about what I should have said differently." "What would you say if you could go back?" Marcus thought about it. "I'd say, tell me more. 3 words. That's all it would have taken. Instead of shutting you down, instead of assuming I knew better, just tell me more and actually listen to the answer." Rachel smiled sadly. 3 words would have saved $3 million. And a lot of sleep. Marcus finished his coffee. "But maybe we needed to learn the hard way. Maybe I needed to fail that badly to actually change. That's an expensive education." "Yeah, well, some of us are slow learners." One afternoon in late September, they were reviewing proposals for the Q4 roadmap when Rachel flagged a submission from someone in customer support. "This is interesting," she said, pulling up the analysis. "He's suggesting we build a predictive model for customer churn based on support ticket patterns. Says he's noticed that customers who file certain types of complaints are likely to cancel within 60 days. Marcus read through the proposal. The engineering lift would be significant, and it's not exactly our core competency. "True," Rachel said, "but the financial impact could be substantial. If we can identify at-risk customers early, we could intervene with retention offers, improve service, address underlying issues." Marcus felt an echo of the old impulse, the urge to kill the idea quickly because it was complicated and outside their comfort zone. But he caught himself. What does the data say? Is the correlation strong enough to justify investment? Rachel pulled up the attached analysis. He ran preliminary numbers on 6 months of ticket data. The correlation is actually pretty robust. Customers who report integration errors followed by billing questions have a 73% cancellation rate within 60 days. "Okay," Marcus said. "Let's fast-track it to the review committee, and let's invite him to present it himself." "What's his name?" "James Chen. He's been in customer support for 2 years. Marcus made a note. "James Chen. Let's make sure he knows his idea is being taken seriously." Later that week, James presented his proposal to the review committee. He was nervous, clearly unaccustomed to presenting to executives, but his data was solid and his passion was evident. The committee approved a pilot program, allocated engineering resources, and asked James if he'd be interested in transitioning to a product analyst role. He said yes. On a Friday evening in October, Marcus stayed late finishing a board presentation on the innovation program's early results. The office was mostly empty, just the familiar skeleton crew. As he packed up his laptop, he noticed a light on in one of the collaboration spaces. Rachel was there, working on something on the whiteboard, complex diagrams and data flow charts. She had that same intense focus he'd seen the night they'd built the monitoring system together. "Working late again?" he asked from the doorway. She turned, startled. "Oh, hey! Yeah, I'm playing with an idea for improving our partner onboarding process, trying to figure out if we can automate the risk assessment." Marcus looked at the whiteboard. The concept was clever, using machine learning to analyze partner data patterns and predict integration issues before they happened. "This is solid," he said. "Have you submitted it through the proposal process?" "Not yet. I wanted to work through the technical details first." Marcus grabbed a marker and pointed at one of the diagrams. "What if instead of a binary risk score, you used a confidence interval? That way, partners know not just whether they're high risk, but how certain we are of that assessment." Rachel considered it. That could work, though it might complicate the UI. They talked through the idea for 20 minutes, building on each other's suggestions, challenging assumptions, refining the concept. It felt natural, collaborative, the kind of productive friction that good teams created. Finally, Rachel stepped back and looked at the whiteboard. "Okay, this is actually really good now. I think it's ready to submit." "I think so too," Marcus agreed. "You know what's funny? A year ago, I would have either dismissed this as too ambitious or tried to claim credit for the improvements. Now I'm just excited to see where you take it." Rachel smiled. "Character development. I like it." As they walked to the elevator together, Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude for the disaster that had forced him to change, for Rachel's willingness to push him, for the opportunity to become better than he'd been. "Hey, Rachel." "Yeah?" "Thank you for not giving up on me, for not giving up on this place." She pressed the button for the parking garage. "Thank you for listening. Eventually." The elevator doors closed, and they descended through the building in companionable silence. The Axiom holiday party in December was held at a trendy venue downtown, all exposed brick and craft cocktails. Marcus arrived fashionably late and immediately regretted his outfit choice. Everyone was dressed more casually than he'd anticipated. David found him near the bar. "Marcus, just the person I wanted to see. Walk with me." They stepped out onto a quieter patio area. The December evening was cool, pleasant, the kind of weather that made people forget Austin summers existed. "I've been looking at the Q4 numbers," David said, "and I've been thinking about leadership, about what makes someone good at this job versus what makes someone great." Marcus waited, uncertain where this was going. "When I hired you," David continued, "I hired you because you were decisive, confident, unafraid to make tough calls. Those are valuable traits, they still are. But I've watched you evolve this year, and I think you've added something equally valuable. The ability to admit when you're wrong and actually change because of it." "I had a very expensive teacher," Marcus said. David smiled. "Rachel's something special, no doubt. But so are you, different but special, and I want to talk about your future here." Over the next 20 minutes, David outlined a vision for the company's next phase. They were growing fast, expanding into new markets, and they needed leadership that could scale without losing the cultural changes they'd fought so hard to implement. "I want you to transition to VP of Innovation," David said, "working alongside Rachel, helping identify and develop new product directions. You've gotten good at nurturing ideas instead of killing them. I want you to make that your full-time job." Marcus felt a complex swirl of emotions: pride, excitement, a twinge of loss for the role he'd defined himself by. "What about product development?" "We're promoting Sarah. She's ready, and honestly, she's been doing half the job already." David clapped him on the shoulder. "What do you say?" "I say yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." Back inside, he found Rachel talking with a group from engineering. He caught her eye and mouthed, "Good news, later." She smiled and nodded, then returned to her conversation. Marcus got a drink and found a quiet corner to observe the party. The engineering team was laughing over some inside joke. The design team had commandeered the photo booth. David was holding court with investors, and throughout the room, people from every level and department were mixing freely, trading ideas, collaborating across boundaries. It wasn't perfect. Organizations never were. There were still politics, still egos, still moments when communication failed or judgment got clouded. But it was better. Meaningfully, measurably better. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Heard the news. Congrats, boss. Or should I say former boss. Marcus receives messages of gratitude from employees and realizes that his painful transformation was worth it because it helped people who once felt invisible feel seen and heard. At a company party, he reconnects with Rachel, who acknowledges how much he has changed and how he now listens, mentors, and supports others. They reflect on the past crisis, recognizing that while it was damaging, it forced growth, revealed overlooked talent, and led to a more open culture. Marcus admits he nearly quit, but an email from Rachel about how good ideas fail because of bad processes convinced him to stay and change. Together, they toast to hard lessons learned and to building a company where ideas are valued regardless of where they come from. Standing not as rivals, but as collaborators, ready to shape the future together.